Let me put it this way. If someone says you ought to have insurance on your car, you ought to wear a seatbelt, you ought to not text and drive, you ought to not drink and drive, there ought to be traffic laws that keep people safe, you ought to have to take a driver's license, that cars ought not to be equipped to go at speeds that belong in NASCAR races. The Auto Club doesn't say that's the first step toward taking our cars away and we'll all be back in horses and buggies. No one says, if someone says, you know what, nutrition is something we should think about. Oh, you mean you're going to stop me from having a hamburger on the 4th of July? Not one Taco Bell or McDonald's has been closed down since Michelle Obama told us to eat vegetables. It's just a good idea, all right? Guns, as the NRA is always saying, should be in the hands of law-abiding, responsible citizens. They should be the ones most concerned with how much irresponsible gun use there is. Doesn't it alarm somebody that Greg Hardy, who was found guilty of domestic abuse, as part of the complaint, threw his former girlfriend onto a couch on which was arrayed a bunch of shotguns and assault weapons, according to her testimony? Now, thank God, they weren't used. Is it necessary in order to have a Second Amendment that Greg Hardy have an arsenal? Or is there some middle ground here? Is there some common sense middle ground? And if somebody mentions that that's possible, does that mean that they want to repeal the Second Amendment? I don't think so. Once you say guns, everything else goes out the window, at least to a certain portion of the country. Am I hostile to the Second Amendment? Absolutely not. Am I hostile to someone having a gun to protect their home and family, or even carrying a licensed gun under certain conditions, or certainly for sporting purposes? Of course not. But if we're talking about just professional sports, I'll sit and wait for somebody to give me an example of an athlete who, by having a gun, turned a dangerous situation around for the better. I'm not talking about someone's right to have one at home just in case, or to use it for sporting purposes. That's not what I'm talking about. Give me an example of a dangerous situation, athlete with a gun, turned the situation around for the better. Okay, happy ending. While you're searching for that, I will begin to read an almost endless list of criminality, tragedies, folly, all associated with athletes having guns because they used them irresponsibly. They had irresponsible attitudes toward them. That's what I was talking about when I mentioned a gun culture. If somebody thinks they got to stick a Glock in their waistband to go to a club, they got the wrong idea about guns and they're going to the wrong clubs.